Explaining that concept, Jonathan.
That's a big part of how Wall Street's been running us into a ditch for the last 30 years.
The debt ceiling is not some sort of macroeconomic concept.
The U.S. isn't really a great place, and it's not really the land of the free.
Get 1,000 people together and let's go lay siege to City Hall.
Hello to all of the real progressives out there. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today we have a fantastic show as always. It'll be a slightly abbreviated show for Easter, but we're also going to have some content for you this week. Quick plug of that. We're going to be sitting down with Eric Kessner, who does a lot of our outreach. I'm sure a number of you have seen our segments with him in DC. We're going to be sitting down with him this week, so that'll drop this week. Make sure to keep your eye out for that. And we'll do another abbreviated show this week at some point. I just don't want to take up too much of your time on Easter for those who happen to celebrate. Happy Easter to those who do. I hope you all are having a fantastic Sunday. We have some important stories to get into today. We're going to talk a little bit about the subway shooting and how that has been covered by the media, how police respond to these kinds of things, and how the media frames these kinds of issues. We have a thread from Alec Karakatsanis, who's become a regular contributor to this show via his Twitter. We're going to go into he has some an analysis of the response to that subway shooting that we're going to get into a little bit. We have a labor update for you guys. As always, we're going to talk about how the progressives and Pramila Jayapal, have essentially betrayed Nina Turner in favor of a pro-corporate, pro-oil representative in Chantel Brown, who ran a deceitful campaign against Nina the first time around. And we're going to talk a little bit. I interviewed James Fauntleroy, Jay Befont, about Elon Musk's bid to buy Twitter. So we're going to show you guys that. We have a fantastic interview as well with Birrion Sondahl, who writes for Real Progressives. He joined to discuss his latest piece. That piece is in the description box if you'd like to see it. All sorts of great stuff to get into today, you guys. Do want to start with the plugs. As always, realprogressives.org for all of our content. To learn more about us or to contribute, you can go to realprogressives.org/donate. We are a nonprofit, and we very much appreciate any contribution. I should have brought this up on the screen, but to make a shameless plea, my 28th birthday was on Thursday, and if any of you would like to give me a gift, throwing a few bucks to Real Progressives would be a very kind gift for you to provide me if you happen to have the funds to do so. Also, make sure that you are subscribed to both of our YouTube channels, Real Progressives and Real Progress in Action. Make sure you're following us on Twitter at Real Progress US and at RP_in_action. I'm at Luke Parcher Show if you want to follow me as well. And I also, once again, this week want to plug the basket that Medicare for All is participating in. You can go to m4m4all.org/donate to help them out. They are planning an event this July, a week of action, and culminated with a event on July 30th. So your donations go to helping them organize and engage in activism, and all sorts of goodies there. M4M for All swag, that kind of thing. Every $10 that you donate gets you a raffle ticket. m4m4all.org/donate if you'd like to help them out as well. So now that we've got all that out of the way, we are going to start with the subway shooting story. I'm not going to get in too terribly deep into the details because I figure most of you have been keeping up with it. It's been very widely reported on Frank James opening fire in a subway train and injuring some 30 people. I think the last number I saw was 29. 10 of them were shot. And there's a lot of angles to go at this from, you guys. Like, there's a lot here, quite frankly. I want to start with this thread that I plugged to start the show off by Alec Karakatsanis. Give me just a moment here to bring that up on the screen. So he says the New York City subway shooting provides a useful moment to reflect on one of the least discussed aspects of the police debate, the incompetence of U.S. police. After thousands of subway cops focused on caging poor people for fare evasion didn't prevent shooting, New York Police Department let the shooter get away and laughably bungled catching him even after he called them. A random person found him. This mirrors pathetic case closure rates for NYPD generally. For those that don't know, cops are impressively terrible when it comes to actually preventing or solving violent crime, and that is regardless of how many resources or how many cops you throw at the problem. It does not help. The police commissioner then released a Trumpian statement that looks like it was written by a movie writer trying to satirize a hapless autocrat. This kind of state propaganda is apparent to the media when it happens in other countries. Of course, we see plenty of acknowledgement of the way that Russia propagandizes its people, and when we do very similar things, that is treated as business as usual. So, excuse me. So why do thousands of cops across the U.S. spend tens of millions of taxpayer dollars? I hate that taxpayer dollars use right there, Alec. It's not taxpayer dollars, it's public dollars on information bureaus designed to create social media, influence reports, plant stories, and change narratives. One reason is that police are so bad at what they tell people their job is. Much of the debate about cops rightly focuses on their millions of physical and sexual assaults, thousands of murders, rampant overtime and sick leave fraud, bribery, perjury, high rates of domestic abuse, links to white supremacists, infiltration of left-wing movements, etc. But they are also historically incompetent. Even with greater and greater budgets and technology, unaccountable U.S. police bureaucracies are getting worse and worse at what they say is their core function. Keep in mind, most of the major U.S. police departments made explicit choices not to test hundreds of thousands of rape kits so they could divert resources to drug possession and homeless arrests. Police don't want you to know these things. Of course they don't. In every city I investigate, cops can't produce coherent answers to the simplest questions about their budgets. In Los Angeles, for example, the sheriff has been laughably unable to explain costs of almost $330,000 per deputy, rising 100% in 10 years. This is base incompetence at doing the things most people are told police should do. And because those public safety things aren't actually why police exist and why they are so well funded, it's also true that police bureaucracies are really incompetent protecting safety. Moments like this are really good times to reflect on the fact that police are incompetent at safety because their real purpose is to protect distributions of wealth and power. I've written more about it all here. So NYPD is all over the subway system, you guys, and Eric Adams has actually increased their presence in the subway system. Did that prevent this from happening? No. Could they even catch him before he left? No. It took civilians to catch him. This is a wonderful display of incompetence. And yet, I saw another story here recently that that they are now going to be essentially blocking some of the emergency exits from the subway system, not to prevent violent crime, not to keep a shooter from getting away, nothing of the sort, to prevent people from dodging their $2 or $3 fee or whatever it might be. So what happens the next time there's a shooting like this or an attack like this? You've now locked people in to be victimized by a violent perpetrator, all because you can't stand the thought of losing a couple of bucks. What's more important here? Is this really about public safety? Of course it's not. But of course, the police incompetence is a point that is very difficult to overlook. And Alec is always doing a fantastic job of pointing it out there. And I also just want to talk about, this is anecdotal, but the way that the media has covered this story, like you guys notice how the more that I read Alec, and I hope the more that I bring you guys his threads, you start to really see very clearly the pro-police propaganda that the press engages in and how they sensationalize crime to justify increasing police budgets and throwing more police resources at the problem. How crime is used by politicians to win over voters by portraying themselves as tough on crime when often that actually is a horrific policy decision to make. We just, there are so many angles to the way that the press takes advantage of these kinds of things, sensationalizes these kinds of things, etc. I also want to point out that things like this would be drastically impacted, or at least the number of times that things like this happen would be drastically impacted by some basic social services. Like, seriously, guys, if everybody had like actual access to robust mental health care in this country, how many attacks could that prevent? How often do we see a mass shooting and then the perpetrator, it comes out, has been like talking about this kind of stuff for years, or posting about this online, or at least having these thoughts and conversations for years? Frank James is one of them. I'm not saying you can prevent every single shooting by providing counseling, but of course it would cut down on the number of them, you guys. The number of mass shootings in this country is absolutely unfucking believable. And a number of things contribute to that, but not the least of which is the lack of public services. Frank James also essentially saying that he thought he was fired for his race and that this was part of a race war, things like that. That's a whole nother element of our society that needs a whole lot of work. So there's a whole litany of angles to all of this. And I just want to drive home for the viewers that the public policy inadequacy is what should be front of mind. Eric Adams' propensity to throw police at absolutely everything while making cuts to social services, that is a significant contributor to this kind of attack. And politicians having done that for decades, right? Like, it's not just Adams. Adams has just pivoted even stronger in that direction. So, and on a kind of similar note here, you guys, pertaining to police, I have another tweet that I want to show you. This is by Ozzy Araujo. 181 NYPD officers lied under oath to, that's essentially the Civilian Complaint Review Board, as you can see there, NYC, New York City, CCRB. Not a single one was fired for it. 181 New York City police officers. So this is just an anecdotal example of what cops are allowed to get away with. And yet, do you ever see the media questioning them as a serious source? Do you ever see the media, while they're citing police departments and cops, do you ever see them turn around and say, hey, by the way, this department has lied all of these times? Do you ever see that? Any context for the viewer at home that this source is less than reliable? Of course not. They play stenographer for these cops. And what do you think the cops are ever going to say about anything? They're always going to say, throw more cops at the problem, right? That's always going to be their solution. Why would it be anything else? So they're all too happy to engage in the senseless and incoherent fear-mongering about crime. They're all too happy to exploit instances that can be sensationalized to their benefit, and the media plays right along. And as Alec often points out, they're never even giving the caveat of, hey, by the way, a lot of experts disagree with this analysis that we're portraying as an expert consensus. So it's just, honest to God, it is astounding to me. I follow this stuff very closely, and it never ceases to amaze me just how strong the propaganda seems to be, and how prevalent the propaganda seems to be, how insistent most mainstream outlets are in continuing to push and participate in the propaganda. So just something to keep in mind as you continue to read the media stories about that subway shooting. They're just going to present it from an angle that is beneficial to the powers that they rely on as sources. That often includes police. We know that the media are not here necessarily in this day and age to serve all of us or to do ethical or responsible journalism or reporting or commentary. They are here to make money. It's a business, and they know that if they can maintain their sources, it's access journalism, they are likely to make more money. They know that if they appeal to those in power like Eric Adams, they are likely to make more money. They're likely to land interviews and things that will get them views, etc., etc. And it totally creates a perverse incentive for the press, and that is, we see that in the results, right? The brazen propaganda, the lack of objectivity, the lack of any nuance, the lack of any context. It's really quite outrageous, and I have seen quite a bit of that as it pertains to Frank James and the subway shooting. So I want to show you guys a clip here. This is James Fauntleroy of Revolutionary Blackout Network, better known as Jay Befont. He just started a new show. He's on YouTube, the Jay Befont Show. He's also on Rumble and Twitch. Go check him out. If you are not already following James' work, he joined to discuss the bid that Elon Musk put in to purchase Twitter. So we got into a number of different angles about that. This is James talking. Oh, I'm sorry, guys. I got to go find it here. I did not put it in the file. I thought I did. Here we go. I apologize. This is Jay Befont on the Elon Musk bid for Twitter. I am very happy to be here with James Fauntleroy, better known as Jay Befont. James, thank you so much, as always, for taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Just want to quickly plug James's new show here. You guys can find the Jay Befont show on YouTube and Rumble. He's also on Twitch. Make sure not to miss any of his fantastic content. And also want to plug the Rev Black Network at Rev Black Network. Make sure you're following all of their work. They're also on YouTube. And James is a part of that group. We've also had Sabby and others on as well. So make sure you're supporting their fantastic work. James, we wanted to talk a little bit about Elon Musk's attempt to purchase Twitter. Can you just, what are your thoughts about a billionaire trying to buy up one of the most popular social media platforms?
Oh, jeez. Look, I know a lot of people are like, oh, but he's a free speech absolutist. Really? Is he? Is he? Nah, I don't believe it for 1 second. Number one. Number two, I don't believe in billionaires. Meaning that I don't believe that somebody should have so much power that they can actually sway a government just because they have so much money. I don't believe in that. And so another thing is either I advocate for either one or two things to happen in Twitter. Either you nationalize it and make a completely public entity and a public square for discourse to take place, or you do the second option is you break it up into smaller companies. It's going to be one of the two. But, for somebody to sit there and to take $43 billion and say, I'll buy you eyes out cash, when $20 billion less of that, you can end homelessness. And I love and okay, so I put out a tweet a couple days ago. And the tweet that I put out, I said that ending homelessness is cheaper than buying Twitter
by a wide margin.
Yeah, basically by a wide margin, yes. And it struck a nerve. It got quite a few likes. But the point is a lot of people were saying, well, that's not Elon Musk's responsibility. and here's my question. If you start a business through exploitation, right, and taking the labor surplus of the people who you work for you, and then you also don't pay any taxes, and then you also use a lot of the public funds that you don't have to pay back for your business ventures, then whose money is that you're using to buy Twitter?
Yeah, Elon took billions in research and development for his companies. There's no talk of that, right? That was public dollars that he was using. And just to double down on your point, by the way, he actually at one point said that when the UN, I can't remember which UN committee it was, but they did a study on world hunger, how much it would cost to end world hunger. And Elon apparently said something along the lines of, when they come forward with that study, I'll basically pay the bill. But they came out and said something like, I might have this a little wrong, but it was something like $6 or $7 billion would end hunger for X amount of time. And do you think Elon has put his money where his mouth is on that one?
He didn't. And the thing is that here's the problem with that. I want you to go to anybody in this country who is either working class or poor, like myself. And we've all had this conversation. I know, Luke, you've had this conversation as well with family members and friends. When you go, man, if you had this huge amount of money, what would you do? And a lot of times we'll talk about, I would go to this place. I would buy, everybody wants to buy a house for their mama. Let's be real. Everybody wants to, of course, for their parents. And then, they'll talk about maybe investing here and there, but then they'll also talk about helping people.
Yeah.
Number one, why not end homelessness? You got it. Like, you legit. Look, this man has so much money that he can legit just end homelessness. If you can sit there and go to the SEC and say, I can literally buy Twitter right now for almost double the amount that it would cost to end homelessness. Like, that, to me, that's a no-brainer. Like, end homelessness. Now, some people are like, oh, but it's a huge process. It's not just a one-time thing. And you're like, absolutely, it's not just a one-time thing. But guess how many people would be able to, from that push, be able to get a job and do other things just by ending homelessness?
Mm-hmm.
Because in a housing first culture, when people are housed first, then it creates a wave of you being able to, for more upward mobility.
You have your feet under you. You can actually go get employed and build up. I mean, I think a lot of people don't necessarily realize some of the hurdles between a homeless person and a job. Like, people say, oh, just go get a job. Well, listen, I mean, does a homeless person have as much access to transportation to get to an interview, or technology to communicate with an employer? Do they have access to the kind of hygiene that you need for an interview or to show up to a job, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? If you at least start them with housing, you're putting them in a place to potentially succeed, instead of having to fight all of these, different levels of obstruction between them and a job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then a lot of times they'll say, well, we gotta fix the mental health in this system. And you don't think that Elon Musk can't have any sway over that either?
Well, that's the thing. It's these billionaires could afford any of this stuff, right? But part of this whole discourse about Twitter that bothers me, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on this, is that it seems to reinforce what I think is a false notion that we actually need the billionaires to fix our society, right? Like, this is really like, these ultimately come down to Congress being absolutely horrific at their job, because we should be using the public institutions to fix these problems like homelessness and poverty, etc. Can you talk a little bit about how people seem to kind of like turn to billionaires and wealthy people instead of looking to the institutions that are supposed to serve us in these ways?
Billionaires own the institutions. They own Congress. They own the presidency.
Mm-hmm.
The billionaires actually own them. So it's like when somebody like me says, well, maybe you should end homelessness instead, technically I'm circumventing the middleman and going straight for the people who actually own the government.
Mm-hmm.
If you guys don't want that to do that, then guess what? Let's end billionaires, and let's instead have the institutions actually listen to the people instead. Because it's sad that the fact that I feel like I have to circumvent the government to go straight to the people who own it.
Yeah.
Because the thing is that if I were to go straight to the government, well, who does this government listen to?
Mm-hmm.
They listen to the billionaires. So in order to do that, then maybe, just maybe, we have to get money out of politics. Well, then that means that the people who have that much money, they shouldn't have that much money in the first place. Mm-hmm. And as you know, I know you're associated with real progressives and how they are a big proponent of modern monetary theory, MMT. Well, that being said, well, then look, I am a firm believer in, if you're going to, not allow these people having so much money that they can affect the democratic process, then tax the hell out of them so that they can't affect the democratic process anymore.
Oh, of course. Yeah. And I do want to clarify. I know you mentioned MMT there. Yeah, MMTers are not at all opposed to taxing the rich. We very much support taxing the rich, right? Like,
that's what I mean.
I think we often get people, when we say taxes don't quote unquote pay for federal spending, people sometimes take that as, oh, you don't want to tax Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk. We very much do. And to your point, it would take away some of their sort of power and leverage in society on political and social things as well, right? Yeah. I don't think Elon Musk should even have the option to go out and buy something like Twitter. I don't think Twitter should be purchasable to one human being. I think it should be, like you said, to start with, a public institution. And I don't think Elon Musk is the guy to fix this either way. And actually, on that point, I was hoping to get your thoughts on this too. Elon notoriously silences his own workers and prevents them from organizing. Do you think this is a person who's actually a champion of free speech when that's how he treats his own employees?
Ask Elon Musk how he feels about unions.
Mm-hmm.
And that will give you a guide into how he feels about free speech. Ask Elon Musk about what he feels about democratizing Tesla and SpaceX. Mm-hmm. Ask him. Because then that'll give you an idea of how he feels about free speech. Because then that means that workers literally have a say, free speech, into how the companies are ran. Not suggestion boxes. No. We're talking about actual ownership. Does he really believe in free speech? See, here's the thing. A lot of liberals and conservatives are up in arms about it because of whatever, for whatever reason. I come in at it from a fully left perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Should somebody have that much power versus the collective having the power? I don't believe that people like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or Warren Buffett should have that much power. And if that means by taxing them so that they have the same amount of power as you or I do, okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
And publicizing things like Twitter, like, right? Like let's take that even like off the table. No billionaires get to have this. This is a public institution. I mean, actually, it would like if you make it a public institution, you can actually enforce the First Amendment then, and then it actually is a platform for free speech, even disagreeable or disgusting speech. So the people who are arguing that Elon Musk is going to make this a free speech platform, I think are kind of missing the clear route to actually have a free speech platform, right?
Mm-hmm. I mean, let's be real. Wasn't Elon Musk that came out against adult entertainment?
Yeah.
And look, okay. Not to shock your audience, but let's be real. There's a lot of adult entertainers that post a lot of things about adult entertainment on Twitter. And guess what? Isn't that free speech? So therefore, then Elon Musk is going to say, "Oh yeah, y'all can't have this anymore." So then what then? Then there's a slippery slope. So then you can't mention certain things about Elon Musk that he may not want you to know about. So then where's the free speech? Where is that free speech absolutism in him?
Mm-hmm.
Because guess what? Now you're handing all this power to somebody where places like Twitter and Facebook are really de facto public squares. So I just don't believe in giving him that much power. Now, there may be some people who disagree because they're Musk stands, which I like to call them. But sorry, but I just don't believe in somebody having, that much power that they can hold sway over the voices of millions of people.
Yeah, he does. He seems to have a very weird kind of cult following that, like, I don't see Jeff Bezos having, or you know what I mean, Richard Branson having, or any of these other multi-billionaires. It's very. He has this weird cult following, and they all come out as an army on Twitter. God forbid we criticize Elon. It's a very weird thing. What do you think causes that?
Supervillains always have a lot of minions.
So he's just a better supervillain than Bezos is?
He's just a super... Look. Let's go back. Let's go back a few years. I think it was probably about 2010, maybe. Elon Musk has such a cult following, he ended up on Iron Man 2. Remember that?
Yeah, I do.
Remember that part where he was in Monaco and he met Tony Stark in the movie because he was just one of those cool billionaires? So yeah, he has a cult following, and they deify him because they feel like, oh well, he's this brilliant, smart billionaire. No, he's not. Like, look, no, he's not. Just because somebody has $1 billion does not make them the smartest person in the room. It makes the most greediest person in the room. And I made a tweet about this earlier, and I think it was yesterday. I find it funny how people will judge somebody who deals drugs on the street for the type of money that they make, but they never judge a billionaire how they get their money.
Yeah, those white collar crimes aren't treated as crimes, are they?
And look, I'll recognize that some people who deal drugs is because they're just trying to make ends meet.
Yeah, it's poverty.
And out of poverty. But you get people who, like Elon Musk, that make their billions of dollars. It's not out of necessity. It's out of excess. And then they do it through exploitation. And people just applaud it like, oh my God, you got all this money.
Yeah.
But how did they do it? And people don't actually ask that question. And people need to start asking, well, how did you get these billions of dollars?
100%. And it's on the backs of workers, especially during the pandemic. They exploited a deadly pandemic to rake in billions of dollars. I mean, I don't think that's righteous or in any way moral or any of that. And to your point earlier, is he like the smartest or hardest working guy in the room? I'm pretty sure either you or I could have billions of dollars if our dad owned an emerald mine in South Africa, right? Like I think if either of us was in that situation, we'd probably be multi-billionaires. Yeah, this idea of meritocracy is kind of absolute nonsense here. The last thing I really wanted to make sure to ask you about here about the Twitter thing, you mentioned it earlier. What if I criticize Elon or Tesla on Twitter once he owns it? Like, what if I go share More Perfect Union's video talking to his workers about how horribly they're treated at Tesla? Is he going to allow that to be shared? I mean, doesn't this create its own set of free speech questions to have somebody of that power in charge of a company like this?
Please name how many negative articles about Jeff Bezos are in the Washington Post.
Yep.
Point that out, please.
Mm-hmm.
See, even if he doesn't say it specifically, there's a culture that says, oh, we shouldn't talk bad about the boss. So Twitter could be like, oh, anything negative about our boss, if it's Elon Musk, yeah, we're gonna have to put that down as disinformation or fake news. See how that can go? Yeah. So that's one of the reasons why I also not for it, because it actually can end up being counterproductive than to what people think it would be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Elon Musk owning Twitter is not a good thing. In fact, Elon Musk owning Tesla is not a good thing. Elon Musk owning SpaceX is not a good thing. In fact, I say nationalize it all. But hey, I'm a socialist. That's what I think.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, I think it belongs in the hands of the many rather than the hands of the few.
100% right. I think that's especially with the particular things that Elon is involved in, right? Cars that are supposed to be trying to go away from fossil fuels, space travel and exploration and science. That should be left to NASA. I mean, we made great strides when we were actually funding NASA, all the technological strides and scientific strides, right? Like all of the things that he's involved in seem like to be very particularly obviously things that should be in the public sphere. And to your earlier point about the Washington Post, Bezos tried to say, well, no, I told them to cover me just like they'd cover anybody else. Like, I'm sorry. Are you as a reporter going to sit there and write a column excoriating your own boss and think that that's going to go well? Like, of course not. It's built into the hierarchy that you're not going to do that. And I think the same thing would apply to those who deal with the algorithms and the moderators and things on Twitter. Can you talk about that slippery slope a little bit?
Yeah, just before I do that, I just want to touch on the fact that about electric vehicles with Elon Musk. Yeah, he's taking that and going the other direction with it, when really that also can still contribute to climate change just as badly.
Right, building the batteries
because building batteries and things like that, instead of actually building mass public transit that can transport people throughout the United States and lower the amount of cars that we literally have on the road, which would also decrease it even more efficiently than building electronic vehicles for people to sit in traffic and burn energy through, while they're doing that. Like, come on. But as far as the whole slippery slope, it's like, what difference is it if companies are owned by corporations that determine your free speech? Because you get a lot of people who go, well, I'd rather Elon Musk, be over my free speech than the government. You still have a dictatorship over your free speech.
Yeah. And to your point, you're just skipping the middleman. That's the only difference. You're just skipping the middleman that's bought off. Yeah.
So it's like, And there's this deification of Elon Musk. I don't even know if deification is a word, but I'm gonna run with it. This
I
is
think it is.
deification. Thank you. Of Elon Musk. Basically, they're making him into their god.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, why are you doing that? In fact, this nation should be run by the masses, not by a single person. Why are you allowing this? You see, instead of him owning it, I'd rather, why not Twitter be publicly owned?
Yep.
I mean, look, if you guys don't want to nationalize it, okay, all right, make it into a into a worker-owned co-op.
I don't think you're going to get your way on that one either, especially if Elon happens to be in charge. But yeah, these are all better ideas than having a billionaire at the helm of anything like this. And
Yeah.
you know, it's almost, I think, an even more important example than specific newspapers or whatever. I mean, Twitter obviously has a lot more influence over people's thoughts than any individual paper like the Washington Post. And you know, it's like we were talking, I think, before we actually went live about some of the censorship issues on YouTube with, you know, if you dare to say Russia or Ukraine or certain other things, they will shadow ban videos. They will alter the way that the algorithm treats you. I think this is obviously true also of Facebook and Twitter. They've really admitted it's true of Facebook and Twitter on certain topics. And they hide behind this guise of disinformation or misinformation. Can you talk about how pernicious that particular narrative is, and how it's kind of weaponized to basically just oppose any speech that the powers that be dislike?
Sure. I mean, look at the disinformation that comes out of the corporate media. And then when those of us in independent left media spaces actually tell the truth, they'll say that it's disinformation. And then quietly they will correct their record and go, oh, well, actually, this is true. But then we're still canceled. We're still deplatformed. We're still, you know, our Twitter pages are still suspended, even though we were correct on the record in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's like, well, you were disinformation according to you at the time, but then it came out that what I said was true.
Mm-hmm.
And so then what? And it is, they give so much credence to these corporate spaces that always have a capitalist, imperialist, you know, oppressive slant to them. And yet when we give accurate information that is counter to their narrative, it's disinformation. But then they end up having an egg on their face and they end up having to correct the record, but we're still silenced anyway.
Yep. The damage is done. Even if they come back and correct the record, the damage is done. This reminds me of, I'm going back a number of months here, but when the inflation stuff started up, and Qasim Rashid, who's a human rights attorney, he put a tweet out that basically said, this is price gouging. Corporations are price gouging, right? And this tweet kind of made the rounds on Facebook as a screenshot, and again, it went viral on Facebook. And all of a sudden, there's a little warning there saying that, quote unquote, fact checkers found this to be false. Like, so who are your fault? Like, what are you talking about? Of course it's price gouging. Who are your fact checkers? They got record profits. Of course it's price gouging. Yeah, but you're not going to see that work the other way, right? It's always our narratives that are being suppressed. And actually, that brings up another question. Why do you think it is that the right wingers always feel like the victims of censorship when it is very often the left that's being censored and sort of shadow banned? You know what I mean?
Look, we literally live in a right-wing country.
Mm-hmm.
It is a right-wingers world in the United States. And when right-wingers complain about censorship, they literally complain about being held accountable for things that they say or try to do from a social aspect. Even though it is still a right-wingers world, especially foundationally economically. Right-wingers have been the proponent of censorship for God knows how long. Colin Kaepernick takes the knee, and he gets featured on a Nike commercial. Next thing you know, a bunch of right wingers are burning their Nikes.
Mm-hmm.
What's his name? Elvis swings his hips a few times. Next thing you know, they want to cancel him.
Mm-hmm.
Fred Hampton decides to be a big proponent of bringing different groups together so that we can help bring up the material conditions for workers across the United States, not just in the Black community, but also in the Latino community as well as the white communities.
Class solidarity.
Class solidarity. And then the FBI goes in and shoots him in his bed.
Mm-hmm.
He was canceled, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because he was a Marxist, and they, on the right, they want to kill him. You know what, talk about cancellation? Guess what? The right wing, they canceled Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He had a 75% of disapproval rating in the United States right when he died.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You want to talk about cancellation? They canceled Black Lives Matter.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not talking about the organization, because the organization has its problems, but we're talking about pretty much the movement.
The movement, yes.
The movement, yes. Looking at you, Ron DeSantis, who actually wants to make protesting illegal in Florida. Guess what? Cancellation.
How about canceling trans kids who aren't allowed now to talk to therapists about their own damn lives or what they're going through? Don't trans say kids, gay, right? I mean, like, for Christ's sake, who's really doing the canceling here?
Yeah. You want to talk about canceling? Let's talk about how women's autonomy is under attack within this country. You guys want to talk about canceling?
Mm-hmm. How about the right wingers who don't want to teach evolution or don't want to teach sex ed in school? Is that not censorship? Is that not canceling? How about, by the way, name me a way you can get canceled in this country quicker than supporting Palestinians. I mean, like, you literally, right wingers are supporting bills that will disallow public funds from going to people who support the BDS movement. Tell me that's not canceling and censorship.
Yeah. I mean, there was a huge wave of books being banned in schools, particularly by a bunch of queer Black writers and authors, because they're queer Black writers and authors in Texas schools. You guys want to talk about censorship? Then let's talk about censorship. Let's talk about what the right has been doing for years. Okay. So the thing is that there's this faux, like, oh my God, they're trying to silence me. Yeah, no. You guys have been silencing the left, the real actual left. I'm not talking about liberals. I'm talking about the real actual left for decades.
Oh,
so much so to the silencing of literally murdering people. And let me tell you this, and I'm gonna take it a step further. How many times have people been canceled and censored and silenced by police in the streets of the United States over and over and over?
Yep.
You want to talk about canceling? You want to talk about canceling? Like, let's be honest. How many women and people have been canceled because guess what? There are 250,000 rape kits in police departments right now that have been untested. And yet you still want to talk about, oh, they're trying to cancel police? Yeah, right. Look at what Joe Biden has done. He has gone to fund the police even more.
Yep.
People want to talk about cancellation.
I mean, how about Julian Assange? Was that a canceling situation?
What about Edward Snowden? What about him being canceled?
Yeah.
Reality winner, Chelsea Manning. What about them being canceled? So the thing is that I do not want to hear about being canceled. What about canceling the Second Amendment for people who look like me? People want to talk about, oh, don't tread on me. Guess what? You guys talk about you don't want the state to tread on you, while you guys look on at people like me being tread on all the time, and you guys don't say a damn word. What about treading on me? What about canceling? You guys are sitting there idly by while my Second Amendment rights are being tread on all the time. Yep. And yet, I don't hear a peep out of you.
Oh no, they go radio silent as soon as it's not some stupid culture issue like a genderless potato head that they can bitch about. It's remember that one? Yeah. Or when Tucker didn't think the M&M was sexy enough anymore. I don't remember which. I think it was the brown M&M was no longer as sexy, and he was upset
Wait,
about it.
hold up. They got an issue with making the the potato head non-binary because you can change the gender, and yet they will still call a boat by a gender term, calling it a she. Are you kidding me? They'll still call a Corvette a she, even though it is a thing. Make that make sense, dog. Like, what?
Yeah. My very favorites are when someone is complaining about pronouns and then they go on to use they in a sentence while they're complaining about pronouns and how impossible it is to it. You know what I mean? Like they tell on themselves. People are just so ridiculous about all this stuff. But yeah, I think the point is that conservatives, they get their panties in a wad over these ridiculous culture issues that are absolutely meaningless and stupid. And then not that obviously I support trans rights and trans kids and all that, but they pick these very like meaningless, innocuous, you know what I mean? We're going to go after the potato head company kind of a situation. And yet, they claim to be the victims of censorship. While to your point, leftists have been not just silenced and deplatformed for centuries, but literally assassinated. I mean, do you think the churches over the centuries were burning conservative books? No, they were burning progressive left-leaning books, books that preached equality and things like this. There's always been a suppression of progressive movements in the form of censorship, and I don't think Elon Musk buying Twitter is going to fix that fucking problem. James, if you have any final words here that you want to close on,
the snowflakery out of it all. That's all I got to say.
The snowflakery. Don't fall for the snowflakery. I really like that. That's fantastic. That is absolutely fantastic. James, thank you so much for taking the time today. Once again, want to encourage the audience, go follow at Rev Black Network and all of their fantastic content on YouTube and elsewhere. Make sure you're subscribed to the Jay Befont Show on YouTube and Rumble and Twitch, wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much for taking the time, James. James, we'll talk again soon.
Thank you so much for having me.
Fantastic interview there with James. Appreciate him taking the time. I do think it's an important thing to dive into from a whole bunch of different angles. When we talk about who gets to have control over these major platforms where people get a lot of their information and interaction on. And certainly Elon Musk, not exactly the answer, you guys. And the one part that I really would like to drive home is he silences his own workers. He refuses to let his own workers organize. Do you think that he's going to somehow take a completely different approach to Twitter than he does his current business? Because Twitter would then be his business. You think if I go post a tweet that's critical of Elon, it's not going to get shadow banned when Elon is literally running the company? I mean, I'm sorry. I think you're out of your damn mind. I think the same dynamic is going to present itself as does at the Washington Post. If you think that those writers are actually free to write anything they want about Jeff Bezos or about Amazon, I mean, I got many bridges in Brooklyn to sell you. I think you're being incredibly naive. I think you're the kind of person that would look up when I say gullible's written on the fucking ceiling. So, this stuff is very important. It's very important that we also do not allow ourselves to fall into the trap of thinking that we need the billionaires to fix our society. Okay. If we want to fix social media free speech issues, that is a public issue. You don't need to turn to Elon Musk or like fucking daddy Elon coming to save the day. I mean, it is really, really ridiculous that we fall into these narrative traps. And there's also like we kind of touched on it there. It's such a weird little cult thing that Elon seems to have. Like I can tweet all that I want about Jeff Bezos and I get very little pushback. The second I tweet about Elon Musk, there's all these fucking like I don't know, these obsequious cult followers in my fucking mentions, oh, daddy Elon this, daddy Elon that. It's a very odd thing. I don't quite understand what that is. But maybe it's because he portrays himself as trying to be like the savior of humanity, right? Like I don't know. But that people fall for that is a sad commentary on our current society, I suppose you could say. So I wanted to get to a piece here. This is in The Lever, David Sirota's outlet. And it's about how the defense industry has essentially bought off talking heads to make sure that their narratives are the most prevalent on mainstream media outlets. The defense industry's Ukraine pundits. To explain the crisis, corporate news networks are leaning on hawkish ex-military officials without disclosing their current defense industry ties. This ties nicely in with the interview that I did with Birrion, which we are going to get to next here. We talked a little bit about how the same sources and experts are trusted that lied us into Iraq. And, you know, it seems like I've talked about this a lot, you guys, but it seems like political commentary and international analysis and this kind of thing. It's like one of the only industries I know where you can spend your entire career being outrageously wrong about everything, and you are still propped up and treated like an expert. You're still made wealthy to share your opinion, etc. And I think that should kind of betray the idea of a free press. That sort of tells you the real dynamic there. The people that are paid are not the people who are the smartest or the most correct. The people who are paid are the ones who toe the correct line. And I want to make sure that everybody takes note of that. Anyway, diving in here, last week, CNN brought on former U.S. Defense Secretary Leon Panetta for his fourth recent appearance to talk once again about Russian President Vladimir Putin's deadly invasion of Ukraine. Quote, "I think we need to understand that there is only one thing that Putin understands, and that's force," said Panetta on Newsroom. Really ironic for a former U.S. Defense Secretary to say such a thing when we exert more force around the world, as he put it, than any other country, or really most of them combined and doubled. The former CIA director added, quote, "I think the United States has to provide whatever weapons are necessary to the Ukrainians so that they can hit back and hit back now." That, of course, would not actually lead towards peace. That does not take us down the path to peace and you know, no more war in the area. What that does is escalate the fucking situation. And that's kind of the point here. That's all of their messaging is geared towards escalation, but in a way where you can pretend you're the good guy. That's the line they're trying to constantly walk. At no time did Panetta or CNN mention that he's a senior counselor at Beacon Global Strategies, a defense industry consulting firm that has reportedly represented weapons manufacturer Raytheon. The firm doesn't disclose its clients, but Raytheon and the defense industry generally stand to benefit from the conflict in Ukraine. The episode is part of a broader pattern and practice. Since Russia launched its invasion of Ukraine, cable news networks have routinely called on defense officials turned consultants to offer analysis and help the American public make sense of the crisis. Often these analysts have used their TV time to call for greater U.S. involvement and bolder moves that would ratchet up tensions between two nuclear-armed superpowers. The networks have consistently failed to disclose 3 analysts' day jobs, describing them instead by only their former high-ranking military or government roles, leaving viewers in the dark about the analyst's financial ties to defense contractors that stand to profit from increased or prolonged conflict. During its Ukraine coverage, MSNBC even failed to include disclosures when the network invited on former Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson, who served on the board of directors at Lockheed Martin, the world's biggest defense contractor. When asked about this matter, Johnson told the Lever, quote, "I have no comment," end quote. Of course you fucking don't. This reminds me of when Nikki Haley, then on the board of Boeing, was constantly introduced on media outlets as, you know, former ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, not current board member of Boeing who stands to profit from the policies that she is espousing, right? We're not going to acknowledge that part. And this same sort of deal here with Panetta, same sort of deal with Johnson, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They had a couple more examples too there. The rest of that piece, I encourage you all to follow the Lever. They do some great reporting, and I think that is quite rare in today's environment. But I thought that piece was a nice little transition here to bring us into the interview that I did with Birrion this last week. If you are not following Birrion, he has a very easy Twitter handle to remember. It's at Birrion. Birrion Sondahl is a volunteer and writer for us at Real Progressives, realprogressives.org, if you'd like to see more of our content from him and our other fantastic writers. Birrion wrote here about the media and how they've covered this Russia conflict. So this is I'm sorry, I got to find it here again. This is Birrion Sondahl on his latest piece for Real Progressives. So I'm very happy to have back on the show Birrion Sondahl, who writes for us at Real Progressives. Birrion, thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Birrion recently wrote a fantastic piece on the media. You can, as always, go to realprogressives.org for all of our fantastic content from writers like Birrion. This piece is titled "Capitalism Hearts Fake News." So lots to get into there. That's kind of a big umbrella, right? I was hoping you could start with, I think sources and who we platform are a really important thing to look at first when you look at an article or look at a particular media outlet. Can you talk about how the same sources and experts who pushed us into the war in Iraq are now being platformed once again to give their expertise on the situation in Ukraine?
Yeah, so this is something that David Sirota's talked about a little bit as well. Essentially, what we're seeing are the same pundits showing up on all the mainstream media outlets who were, cheerleading for the war in Iraq and, talking about the weapons of mass destruction, which did not exist. And then there's also a lot of defense contractors and defense lobbyists, people with connections to the military-industrial complex, who are, frequent contributors to the mainstream media's coverage on, any war.
Yeah, absolutely. The same culprits end up getting to espouse their opinions all over again. You also had a quote in there. I wish I could remember who it was by, but that essentially said the U.S. may have the constitutionally freest press, but in function, it's just very obsequious to power. Can you talk a little bit about how that presents itself? Because a lot of people do like to kind of tout that we have this free press, and I think sort of fall into the illusion that that's actually how it operates. Can you talk a little bit about how our press actually works?
Yeah, I think that was a John Pilger quote, but I'm not 100% on that. But essentially what happens is the media is being run as a for-profit operation. So they're only interested in what's going to get them more viewership, more clicks, more, advertisement money. They're not interested in reporting the actual news. So, even though constitutionally we have a free press, since it's privately owned and run for profit by very few companies actually own 90% of the media, what we get is a very corporate line, which does not actually line up with what we're seeing is actually happening, which is why we get the fake news.
Absolutely. One thing that kind of confuses me, you mentioned this in the piece too, is that there have been a number of very prominent pieces of work on this from Michael Parenti and Noam Chomsky and Matt Taibbi, and others too. And I'm just curious, after, it seems like we should understand this maybe a little bit better than we do as an audience, as a country. Can you just talk about what maybe stops us from having this understanding?
Yeah, and I wish I knew why people don't really understand this, because it's been going on for years, really for over a century. I mean, there's never really been that much of a free press when it comes down to it, since we have a private ownership system. But yeah, people like Michael Parenti and Noam Chomsky really exposed it back in the 70s. Michael Parenti wrote Inventing Reality, and Chomsky followed that up with Manufacturing Consent, which are, both long works that really go into detail on how the media is essentially just a propaganda wing, of the corporate complex. They're not providing us with news. It's entertainment. So.
Yeah, that is absolutely the case. It is. They figured that out a while ago, that what they really need to do is keep eyes on the screen. And actually, I want to say it was Limbaugh. I might have this wrong, but Limbaugh once said, I think, that he understood that his job was to fill the gap between the advertising segments. So he fully understood. My job is just to keep people tuned in for the advertising slots, right? So as awful as Limbaugh was, he kind of did acknowledge the actual media dynamic there. Can you talk about how that kind of incentive structure just poisons things from the start?
Yeah, I mean, if you get that feeling, actually steadily the amount of advertisements has grown over the past few years. If you watch like a TV show from 10, 15, 20 years ago, it'll be like a 51-minute TV show because they only had 9 minutes of commercials. And now you look at, it's like I don't know what it's down to now, like 41 minutes for a TV episode, maybe. So we get a steadily increase in advertising and less actual content. And I think this happens with the news as well.
Yeah, it becomes entertainment more than anything else. You mentioned a specific dynamic that I think kind of proves how unreliable our press is with the reporting on Russia and Ukraine, and that is the sort of the chemical weapons situation where the U.S. government essentially just put out there that we think Russia might use chemical weapons, and then the press essentially admitted that while they had no proof of that they were going to run with it. Can you talk about how that presented itself and why there's no accountability for journalists who knowingly lied about a very important thing?
Yeah, so this is a new, U.S. government strategy they want to stay ahead of Russian propaganda with their own propaganda, I guess. NBC News actually, they admitted that the Biden administration is acting on either, incorrect or incomplete intelligence, and they're simply feeding out items like, Putin's going to launch a chemical attack. And even before the war started, they were saying that Russia was going to cause a false flag as a reason to start the war. And of course, that didn't happen. So basically, the media is being fed false intelligence or incomplete intelligence from the Pentagon, from the Biden administration, and they're just rolling with it because there is no accountability. It's kind of absurd that the public would believe this, but I've seen a lot, I don't know how many Ukrainian flags on Twitter handles I've seen and Facebook profiles who are just buying in completely to this propaganda.
Yeah. It's strange. You don't tend to see, like, even in my town here, some of the lights on the buildings and stuff, they've changed them to the blue and yellow, and you know what I mean? Wrong time to wear this hat, I suppose. But but I've never seen them light up the buildings with the Yemen flag or with like the Syrian flag or the Somalian flag or Palestine's flag. None of it. I've never seen any of that. We're going to stand in solidarity with people who are, enduring suffering from war. Never for them, only for Ukraine. It's kind of remarkable how one-sided all of that is. You also mentioned one of the more sort of explicit versions of access journalism, which is how the White House press room works. Can you talk a little bit about that and how journalists essentially turn into stenographers because of wanting to maintain their access?
Yeah, this was an incident where Joe Biden slipped up and admitted, well, I'm supposed to call on you next. Yeah, he had a list of the approved reporters who he was supposed to call on during a press conference, which kind of defeats the point of it being a press conference if there's only certain approved media who are getting the answers from the president.
Mm-hmm.
I guess they want to avoid any tough questions, if Ryan Grimm were in the room or from The Intercept or anyone who's willing to actually ask these hard questions. Like I think it was Ryan Grimm who asked Nancy Pelosi about the COVID relief bill, and she deflected and said, well, there's people dying in Ukraine right now, but the simple fact of the matter is that shouldn't mean we have to cut 15 million from COVID relief during the middle of a pandemic in order to send more weapons to Ukraine.
Yep. And yet it was Nancy's PAYGO bill that sort of causes more hurdles than should be there to increase spending for things like the COVID bill. And since we took that slight detour, can you just briefly explain why it is that we can afford both of those things for the audience who may not actually know?
Well, of course, through modern monetary theory, we know that it's a fiat currency that we have here in the United States, and Congress authorizes spending. They don't need to have any source for that. They create a bill, and then the money is created, and it goes out to whatever is authorized. And unfortunately, currently, that's just being used to send billions of dollars of weapons over to Ukraine rather than Medicare for all or anything that we really need in the United States.
Yeah. 100% the case. Yeah. And then I also wanted to ask you about how you started the article by pointing out what I consider a very interesting dynamic, which is that it seems like everybody thinks that large portions of the mainstream press are fake news. It's just that, depending on which partisan side you fall on, you think that the other side's is fake news. And it's like, so you talked about Trump kind of getting the general idea right, but obviously the details very wrong in a sense. Can you just talk about how the populace seems to view the mainstream media?
Basically, you have the two camps, the whole red versus blue dynamic, where Democrats are getting fed their propaganda from MSNBC and CNN, and the whole Republican Party gets all of their propaganda straight from Fox News. And both of these sides have an agenda, and they're not interested in giving you the straight information. It's actually interesting that Tucker Carlson has had better guests on recently. He just had Chris Smalls, who organized the Amazon union, on, than a lot of Rachel Maddow wouldn't ever have him on.
Yeah. It is fascinating, and the fact that Smalls got pushback for that, I think, is quite egregious. I mean, you spread your message wherever you can spread your message. That's not an endorsement of Tucker Carlson, for Christ's sake.
Yeah, it's like when Bernie did a Fox News town hall, and everyone in the audience was starting to agree with Bernie and saying, "Oh, wait, Medicare for all sounds like a great idea. Wait, we don't have to pay for health care and premiums." And then
I don't remember which smug host it was that thought he had a gotcha, where he asked the whole audience, like, how many of you support a Medicare for all? And they all start applauding, and he's like, oh, fuck.
Yeah. But then Bernie got pushed back. They're like, oh, you're a Democratic candidate. You can't be showing up on Fox News. It's like, all these people loved him,
Yeah. Yep. And if you're just giving up on spreading your message to the opposition, then you're just, I don't even know what that is. That's just, it's pathetic. It's feckless, pretty ridiculous. Yeah. So, and the last thing I wanted to get to here, I really wanted to show, in case the audience hasn't seen this clip, that it was actually, it's funny, we're talking about the mainstream press, because I got to give credit when it's due. It was put together by Mehdi Hassan, who does a show up for MSNBC, but he did put this clip together, and I think it's a great clip. It's on a different topic than the Russia situation, but it's about climate change, and it's essentially comparing an interaction that happened a few days ago on Good Morning Britain, and comparing that to that famous scene from David Sirota's Don't Look Up. So we'll watch this. It's just a short little clip showing the two back and forth and how similar they are, and then I want to get Birrion's thoughts.
All right.
Many people would agree that we have to wean ourselves off oil, but at the same time, they deeply resent having their personal lives massively interrupted.
How big is this thing? Could it destroy someone's house? Is that possible?
I don't think any of us want to be disrupting people's lives, but I think given the science and the things that academics are saying about what oil is causing around the world and in this country too, this is the level of action that needs to be taken.
It's somewhere between 6 and 9 kilometers across, so it's big. It would damage the entire planet, not just a house.
I wonder if any of you have read the latest IPCC reports that have come out this year. What they have said is that we are on the road for climate catastrophe.
Well, as it's damaging, will it hit this one house in particular that's right on the coast of New Jersey? It's my ex-wife's house. I need it to be hit.
And the clothes that you're wearing, to some extent, owe their existence to oil because they were taken in a car or a truck or a van to a shop,
I'm sorry, are we not being clear?
We're talking about crop failure by 2030. We're talking about people in this country right now in fuel poverty because of the prices of oil. And you're talking about the clothes that I'm wearing.
No.
We're trying to tell you that the entire planet is about to be destroyed.
Well, and for those who are planning to get away over the Easter holidays, could they expect more disruption, do you think?
Just something we do around here. We just keep the bad news light.
Pretty unbelievable stuff. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's pretty interesting how it actually fits the David Sirota script, almost word for word. And David Sirota, when he worked on that film, he was thinking about climate change. It's the entire Don't Look Up is an allegory for climate change and how we are not addressing the elephant in the room. And that's another thing that the media completely loves to ignore. And I think that video is a great example of how they treat it when it comes up. Like, well, we don't want to inconvenience people. Your clothes were made by oil because they went on a truck. That's one of the most absurd arguments I've ever heard in favor of mass planetary destruction and the possible extinction of the human race.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of when Wolf Blitzer was pressed on our I don't remember if it was Iraq or Afghanistan, but somewhere where we had committed atrocities, and he was pressed on this, and he basically said, well, but if we didn't have the military industrial complex, what about the jobs? Like as though we can't find other things for people to do. It's just such an absurd argument. And that actually kind of leads me into the concept I wanted to close on here, which is the propaganda by omission. This is something I try to talk about a lot because I think it's one of the most prominent forms of propaganda. Can you talk about how maybe on both climate and on the Russia situation, the media engages in that kind of propaganda?
Yeah, I mean, actually, when we're talking about war, we have to talk about climate change at the same time. And I don't think I've seen anything, even from less mainstream sources that are directly linking the climate crisis and war, especially when talking about, Ukraine, like how much the United States military pollutes. It's the number one polluter in the world. It's, I think, the equivalent of like the 46th. If we're a country, it'd be like the 46th most heavily polluting country, just the military. And we don't see any of that covered by any media almost. Some climate groups will get into it occasionally, but I think as we move forward, we really need to link the military industrial complex and climate change because these are a connected issue.
100%.
And, by prolonging this war with Russia, it's just going to make things worse. What we really need to be doing is looking for a peace agreement and, international cooperation to address the climate catastrophe instead of beating the drums of war and starting a new Cold War with Russia and China and starting a new, arms race. That's not going to do anything to address what's coming with the new IPCC report saying it's likely 1.5 degrees is unavoidable at this point. We're looking more at like 2 degrees, which is, massive crop failures, droughts, starvation on a global level. And yet here we are just sending billions of weapons to other NATO countries, to Ukraine. Raytheon is just having record profits, I'm sure.
Yeah, and to your point, militaries are direct polluters. To your point, I mean, how do you? It's jet fuel for those jets, and it's fossil fuels that are taking the aircraft carriers and the battleships all around the world, and tanks and all. I mean, it's all fossil fuels, and also, and I'm wondering if you can touch on this because this was also in your article. It's very frequently the case that resources have a great deal to do with the wars that we're fighting, and in many cases that includes oil, or in the Middle East, lithium, or what have you. And in this case, there is the Nord Stream pipeline that is a significant part of this, and you point out that much of the press seems to treat that as sort of I don't know, something to maybe mention once or twice, but not put front and center. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, they're completely ignoring the whole resource basis of this war, where the Nord Stream pipeline would be shipping oil and natural gas. I guess it's a natural gas pipeline to Europe. But now, because of sanctions on Russia, they've completely cut off, not quite completely yet, but they're trying to completely cut off oil and gas purchases from Russia, which is going to leave Europe in a lot of hurt. Since I think it's 30 to 40% of their imports come directly from Russia. And that's just being completely ignored by most of the media. And it's just it's like when Biden gets out there and calls this the Putin price hike and says we're just going to have to deal with higher prices. That's not actually connected to anything in reality. I mean, we've seen crude oil prices have actually dropped recently, while the price at the pump has not significantly changed. and the oil companies are just gouging the consumers at this point. But I don't hear anyone on the media talking about that, mentioning the record profits of the oil and gas companies when we should be, transitioning away from oil and gas. They're just trying to stick it through the consumers, which, if we had a Green New Deal in progress, something, we could be working our way away from it. We need, massive investing in mass transportation, rail, electric buses. And it's a major issue that's just not being addressed by hardly anyone.
Yeah. And that speaks to that built-in assumption from the clip on Good Morning Britain, where he assumes, there's no other way to transport things like clothes that, you know what I mean? It's so ridiculous. No, there are plenty of ways we could do that if we actually wanted to invest in it. A fantastic piece from Birrion. Just want to show everybody once again and encourage everybody to go to realprogressives.org to find all of our articles and podcasts and all sorts of great content. Birrion, thank you so much for taking the time. I also want to encourage everybody to follow Birrion. He has the easiest Twitter handle to remember in the world. It's at Birrion. I've had it up on the screen throughout this interview. So please go follow Birrion and his work. Thanks for being here.
All right. Thank you very much, Luke.
Excellent piece and an excellent interview. Huge thanks to Birrion for taking the time. And just want to reiterate, you guys go check out all of our fantastic articles, all of our podcasts, etc. realprogressives.org. Wanted to give a huge shout out. I saw Donald left a super chat in there for my birthday. Thank you, Donald. I saw super chats from Double K and from Call Me John. Thank you all so much for helping us out. Super chats are one of the other ways that you can make a contribution to our organization. I apologize, you guys, that I am so bad at keeping up with the chat. I am usually trying to run StreamYard here, and I only have a chance to peek over there when I have a clip going or something like that. So if you've left a super chat and I haven't mentioned it in the past, I do apologize. We very much appreciate any contribution that you all can give. And we also appreciate the interaction on the videos. Any comments, like, subscribe, share, etc. That all helps us grow. So a quick reminder that if you don't mind hitting that like button, making sure you're subscribed to all of our channels, and sharing our content as widely as possible. Very much appreciated. Also share articles from our fantastic writers like Birrion. So we have a climate story that I want to get into here. This is in Common Dreams, as often is one of the only outlets covering the climate. Obviously, The Lever covers this quite a bit as well, but there are seldom, mainstream articles about the climate catastrophe, as we were just talking about with Birrion. This is by Brett Wilkins. Activists decry Biden's reckless resumption of fossil fuel leases on public lands. Quote, this is an ugly betrayal of Joe Biden's campaign promises and his administration's rhetoric on environmental justice and climate actions. This is another area where Biden has reneged on innumerable promises that he made on the campaign trail. And we're going to get into that in a bit, too, on this particular topic. Activists condemned Friday's announcement by the Biden administration that the U.S. Bureau of Land Management will resume oil and gas lease sales on public lands as yet another betrayal of President Joe Biden's promises to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and tackle the climate emergency. The U.S. Interior Department explained Friday afternoon that the lease sale resumption is in compliance with a 2021 federal injunction blocking the Biden administration from enforcing a temporary pause on new leases for oil and gas drilling on public lands and waters. The department described the onshore oil and gas lease sales as significantly reformed while announcing a first ever increase in the royalty rate for new competitive leases to 18.75%, up from the 12.5% minimum rate required by law. While the progressive watchdog Accountable.us applauded the administration's decision to raise the royalty rate, most climate campaigners decried the resumption of the fossil fuel lease sales amid a worsening planetary emergency. So this, you guys, just to pause for a second, this is what the Democrats do. They maintain the core of the problem, but they make some virtually meaningless, perfunctory, innocuous reform to it, like adding a few percent to the royalty rate, and they act as though they're like fucking FDR. They could have just ended the damn program and not gone forward with these leases at all. But they want credit for taking what is not even really a middle ground. It's a very conservative compromise. They want credit as though they're fucking progressive, as though they're like environmentally friendly for this. It's beyond outrageous. It's just utterly beyond outrageous. Oh, hang on just a second. There we go. Quote, it is never a good sign when the president announces something at 5 p.m. on a Friday, but President Biden can't get away with this disastrous climate decision, said Varshini Prakash, executive director of the youth-led Sunrise Movement. Fact of the matter is that more drilling won't solve high gas prices right now, so why is Biden breaking his campaign promise to stop drilling on public lands? And we also have, oh, man, I am not handling StreamYard very well today, am I, guys? We have a tweet here that points out this hypocrisy I wanted to show you all. This is Ken Klippenstein. He's an excellent follow on Twitter at Ken Klippenstein. If you're not following him, he is just one of the absolute best. He retweets an NBC News tweet saying Biden administration says it will resume sale of leases to drill for oil and gas on federal land starting next week, causing an upset among environmentalists, the story we were just reading about. And he retweets it with a quote from Joe Biden in the New York Times, quote, and by the way, no more drilling on federal lands, period, 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 Mr. Biden told voters in New Hampshire in February of 2020. So it's not just a reneged promise, you guys. He said, period, 4 times to emphasize how literally he meant no more drilling on federal lands. He's now violated that a number of times. We covered just a month or two ago how he was trying to lease a whole bunch of a whole bunch of land in the Gulf of Mexico to drilling companies and big oil companies, who, by the way, already have more land than they're using. So this is an area where he has not just gone back on explicit promises that he drove home and campaigned on. It's one where he has totally reversed track and gone in the complete other direction, where he has pushed policies that will further harm the planet. It's not even just stagnant policies. He's not even just maintaining the problem. He's adding to it. Great job pointing out that hypocrisy by Ken Klippenstein, and great coverage in Common Dreams. But this is, you guys, like, I don't know how to emphasize this any more than I already have. The climate catastrophe is as important a story as the human race has ever encountered. It's as big a problem, as existential a problem as the human race has ever encountered. And we are treating it like it is almost nothing. We're treating it like it's renaming a local post office or some fucking shit. You can't find an article on this stuff if you try. Certainly not in the mainstream press, you can't. And when you do, it's all framed in this ridiculous, like, as though it's climate action or jobs. They frame it as though, like, you're going to take an economic hit if you take action on the climate crisis. It is the mishandling on the press's behalf of the climate catastrophe is tantamount to their pushing us into the war in Iraq. It's tantamount to how they've covered Ukraine. It is journalistic malpractice, egregious, extraordinary journalistic malpractice. And obviously, as you guys can tell, the story gets me a little bit worked up. One of these climate stories is going to have me gesticulating so strong that I pull a fucking muscle up here one of these Sundays. Have to go on the injured list. But I cannot possibly implore my audience strongly enough to take this seriously. This is the biggest problem that our species and our planet currently face. I cannot possibly implore you strongly enough to take it seriously. So, great coverage again from Common Dreams. The Lever, David Sirota, always on top of this. If you haven't seen Don't Look Up, go watch Don't Look Up. It is an absolutely perfect metaphor for this story. And anywhere that you can get involved pushing for climate action, I just encourage you all to do so. I cannot possibly overstate how important this is. It would be impossible for me to. Okay. So I want to get into a story here that kind of circles back. We were talking about the subway shooting and Eric Adams' policies, the NYPD's handling, the media's handling, etc. This is in Jacobin. It's by Ross Barkin, who I had the pleasure of interviewing maybe a year ago. He's a journalist that covers New York politics, and he has been all over Eric Adams' term as mayor. New York Mayor Eric Adams is a do-nothing mayor. New York Mayor Eric Adams, whose first 100 days in office just came to a close, has had few accomplishments to brag about, but his hidden source of political strength lies precisely in the fact that he never promised he'd do much in the first place. And I want to point out how this also sort of this same dynamic applies to Joe Biden, right? Where he's breaking a lot of promises on things like climate and student debt cancellation and things like that. he was kind of careful not to make any promises that were too strong. Like even his promises were kind of timid, compromise positions to start with. Tepidly progressive at best, right? If you don't promise too much, then you can kind of be a do-nothing leader, and it tends to hurt you a little bit less. More than 100 days have passed since Eric Adams was sworn in as New York's 110th mayor. The milestone is arbitrary, dating back to Franklin D. Roosevelt, and there's little reason to believe grand conclusions can be drawn from a few months in power, but it's worth taking stock because politicians do make promises they try, in some cases, to keep. I love that sentence. For the ambitious, 100 days is enough to lay the groundwork for a greater agenda. Bill de Blasio, much maligned now, was already fighting to get funding for the universal pre-kindergarten expansion that would remake New York's social safety net. 100 days in, the former mayor had signed into law significant pieces of legislation like the mandating of paid sick days in the private sector. Adams, conversely, has pitched very little. He does get around plenty. He shows up at the scenes of street crimes and parties with celebrities like Cara Delevingne. He has been an unabashed booster for big business and promised to bring the city back from its COVID doldrums. Some of Adams' act can be helpful. The public expects the mayor to be a cheerleader and performer. It's fine to have swagger when leading the biggest city in America. Getting tourists back to Manhattan is integral to the city's economic future. So much of the Adams agenda, though, is lacking. There is no big ticket policy items or large safety net expansions. There are few tangible programs or projects for New Yorkers to grasp onto. Adams does not empower his agency heads to dream up proposals for the parks or streets that break credibly from the past. It has been, for all its noise, one of the least imaginative administrations in modern times. Rather than fight for new affordable housing and the return of single-room occupancy hotels to house the poorest, Adams has deputized police to kick the homeless off the subways. He is nowhere close to ending the problem. Rather, there has been much bellowing about lowering the crime rate and failure thus far to bring it down to pre-pandemic levels. Predictably, Adams has leaned into heavy-handed policing as the solution and threatened at various times to bring back some version of stop and frisk. Adams, a former police captain, is a booster of dangerous surveillance mechanisms like facial recognition technology. He has floated the implausible idea in the wake of a mass shooting at a subway station in Brooklyn of installing metal detectors in stations. So he obviously goes on to get into a whole number of other issues there, but I wanted to tie that into the story that we talked about earlier with the subway shooting, and how ineffective police are at actually dealing with it. Adams, of course, reneging on a number of promises here and actually going backwards as it pertains to how the homeless and the impoverished are treated in New York. We've all seen the videos, right? While police can't stop an active shooter or prevent an active shooter from engaging in violence, while police cannot solve violent crimes at any reasonable rate whatsoever, especially, by the way, crimes committed against women. Go look at how many rapes are actually solved by police. While they fail miserably at their job to prevent or solve violent crime, they are very good at harassing homeless people or waking people up on subways, right? Really good at that. Really good at harassing you on whether or not you paid your $2.75 to take the fucking subway, right? Real consequential shit. They're really getting at the core problems in society by harassing people over $3 aren't they? This is what police resources go to, you guys. And it's also worth pointing out that Alec talks about this all the time. Alec Karakatsanis, at Equality Alec on Twitter. Go give him a follow. He talks about this all the time, that you'd be astounded how many resources police departments put towards their PR teams. In other words, people who are there to make the department look good, not make the department act good, right? So cover up for their crimes and their violence and their mishandling of situations, their brutality, their theft from the public, via asset forfeiture and all these kinds of things. Cover up for that. LAPD gangs, right? The Los Angeles Police Department pours millions and millions and millions of dollars into dozens of PR experts. So let's not address the problem. Let's just try to make it look like we don't have one. That is their strategy. And NYPD, of course, no different here. So shame on Eric Adams for such just worthless mayoral first 100 days. He also, I find it particularly disgusting how Eric Adams will, as a cop who supports stop and frisk, he will sit there and play the race card. And whenever he is attacked from the left, he basically accuses said person of racism. Ross Barkan has also actually spoken about this. He went on Breaking Points a month or two ago to talk about exactly that. Any negative piece written about, I'm sure Ross for this piece has probably been accused of racism. This is what Eric Adams falls back on. And I just find it particularly to minimize a very real thing. We do have a serious problem with racism in this country. To minimize and trivialize and weaponize such a real problem in such a disgusting way, when you're part of that problem, when you support stop and frisk, when you increase funds for police, when you instruct police to go out and harass people, disproportionately people of color, you have the gall to portray yourself as some sort of fucking social justice hero. It is nauseating. It is just deplorable and condemnable and morally repugnant, and people should not fall for it from anyone like Eric Adams. So great piece there from Ross Barkan and Jacobin, keeping track of Mayor Adams' lack of action there in New York in his first 100 days. Huge shout out to them. I would like now to do our weekly labor update. We have some more Perfect Union clips to bring you, as well as an article and a tweet here. We're going to start with the tweet. Another victory to celebrate in terms of the labor push. This is More Perfect Union at More Perfect US on Twitter. Go give them a follow as well. They say breaking: Verizon retail workers in Washington have won their union election 11-1. The workers won their union despite relentless union busting from Verizon corporate. They're calling on other stores across the country to join their movement. If you work at a Verizon or Apple store and are organizing with your coworkers, we'd love to talk to you. You can stay anonymous, DM us, or use the contact info in our bio. If you happen to work at Verizon or know someone who does, please point that out to them and direct them to More Perfect Union. Another great victory here, you guys. And I just want to point out the 11-1, right? I think in Starbucks stores, they're like they've lost 2 stores and won 23 or something, or 25. I'm not exactly sure about the number, but the record is fantastic, right? And a lot of those have been like either unanimous or 1 or 2 votes against, that kind of vote tally. So another huge win here, this one in Verizon. And I just cannot emphasize enough how impressed I am and how inspired I am by the sort of universal push that we're seeing here across industry, across geography, wherever you happen to be. There seems to be a push across a number of industries to unionize and to have workers sort of seize back and wield the power that they have as the masses. So that is fantastic news that More Perfect Union brought us about Verizon. We're now going to show a More Perfect Union clip. This is about Lamb Weston. I had not heard of Lamb Weston. I'm sure many of my audience haven't either, but they actually make a whole lot of French fries for establishments that you probably do recognize, major fast food outlets and things like that. So this is More Perfect Union talking about Lamb Weston workers and how they're treated.
Being treated fairly, that's for damn sure.
How many more people you guys want to take down?
I'm gonna cry. Lamb Weston makes McDonald's fries, Arby's.
We make Chick-fil-A waffle fries.
Burger King, Wendy's.
Alexia is a grocery store line that we do a lot of.
I do fear for my safety at work.
I suffered a mini stroke at work. My stroke was definitely work-induced. My anxiety has been elevating in the last 2 months just because of constant forced overtime. 5 times in a row, they would hold me over on my Friday.
The floor was full of oil. I went and took a step with my right foot. It slid out. My left leg kind of tucked up under me. I heard a big snap. I was diagnosed with a torn meniscus.
I was doing a cleanup and I lifted a very heavy part of machinery that I have to put back together, but it takes 2 people. My supervisor was calling on the radio constantly, asking if I had finished to start up the line. I called her and she didn't come to help me. got some nerves caught on my neck, my vertebrae.
The doctor, he sent a note dictated in there that I was to have a work hours restriction of no more than 8 hours a day for the next 30 days. The schedule came out 24 hours after they got that notice from the doctor, and I was scheduled for 4/12 straight.
When I called the next day, because I couldn't hardly walk, my knee was badly swollen. Nobody had known what had happened, didn't understand. By October 6th, another supervisor told me to go home because they had no work for me. They couldn't keep me on just one line. They wanted to be able to rotate me. I have been off work since then.
They never helped me with workers' comp, nothing. And I ended up getting terminated.
This has been, for me, and I know for a lot of people, the worst company we work for. If I get sick, I get attitude. If I get hurt, I get punished.
We had an employee die. Nobody should die at their job from nothing.
Going back in the last couple months, 2 or 3 months, in a 5-day work period, I'm working at least 3 overtimes.
It's the end of the shift, and we are about to clock out, or we already clock out. They open the window. Oh, I forgot to tell you, you need to hold over.
I almost feel like a cattle. And they're cracking the whip over us. We're not machines, we're not. Even the machines needed time off.
You are nothing. You're a replaceable number. That's it.
In the new union contract, I want to see better wages, better family and health, wellness time. You know, I mean, they can do it for our HR group. Why can't they do it for us?
I want to see a significant raise, not just a cost of living of 5%, whatever, $1.50 more than. I want to see a competitive raise.
Make it safer for us. It's time to stop pushing us. It's time to stop having a supervisor who can turn up your line from home. It's time to stop putting us in danger.
I don't want to be mistreated anymore.
Fantastic stuff as always from More Perfect Union. I saw Crystal in the chat. They're talking about, there are a lot of potatoes in Washington. It's actually kind of where the Washington, Oregon, and Idaho borders meet, in eastern Washington and Oregon and in southern Idaho. That's where a lot of the potatoes are made. I think a lot of these workers were in Idaho, and that is, or made. Potatoes are grown, not made. But you guys get what I'm saying. And the way that those workers are treated, egregious, as is often the case with these kinds of major companies. Good on those workers for standing up for themselves. Good on More Perfect Union for bringing coverage to it. And I also wanted to show you guys here a couple of other pieces. The first one here is in Vice. We'll bring that up on the screen here. This is by Samantha Cole. It's about Starbucks. Starbucks posts fake union tweets in anti-union flyers. The tweets are made to look like they're coming from accounts that don't exist or are dated in a way that makes them obviously fake, union organizers said. Starbucks is posting union-busting flyers in stores that include fake tweets made to look like they're from the union's Twitter account, according to union leaders. The flyers show apparently doctored screenshots of tweets from the Starbucks Workers United, which is the official account of the Starbucks unionization effort, and at one.starbucks.com, which doesn't exist. According to the Starbucks union organizer, the flyers appeared in stores in Pittsburgh and North Carolina. The fake tweets say things including, quote, in collective bargaining, you start with everything you have and negotiate for more from there. And, quote, in collective bargaining, everything is up for negotiations. You could get more, the same, or less. And once you negotiate a contract, you are locked in. When reached for comment, Starbucks union organizers directed Motherboard at a TikTok they posted Thursday outlining several inconsistencies that show why the tweets included in Amazon's anti-union flyers are fake. The TikTok points out that none of the tweets cited exist on the Starbucks Workers United feed, and identical tweets with different dates repeated throughout the flyers. One of the tweets is dated June 1st and is missing a year in the screenshot. June 1st, 2022 obviously hasn't happened yet, and the Starbucks Workers United Twitter account was started in August of 2021, which means that date is implausible. And @1.starbucks.com is clearly fake because Twitter doesn't allow usernames with periods in them. In addition to the fake tweets, the flyers titled, "You May Have Heard," contain familiar anti-union rhetoric. Please take the time to do your research, ask questions, and above all, think for and be yourself. They state, "You do not have to join the union. You should not sign anything presented by the union without reading it, fully understanding it, and being fully informed as to what the impact on you individually will be." They also claim that the Workers United Union is in the dues collection business and that the union has a lot to gain by organizing Starbucks locations, and partners will be the ones who pay. Partners are the union, so that's a completely incoherent point, but nonetheless, they are trying to get away with doctoring flyers and lying, and that's hardly surprising at all. I'd like to see if the NLRB has anything to say about it. Unfortunately, they've been so thoroughly defanged that it is likely they will not. But Starbucks here engaged in more out-and-out deceit, more illegal union busting. Hardly a surprise there, considering that they're getting absolutely killed in almost all of these elections happening across the country. And there are very few things that will put a bigger smile on my face than that, right? Excuse me, guys. And we have one more piece here on the topic of labor. This in The Lever. How union workers' money funds a union buster. This is by Matthew Cunningham Cook. As Starbucks tries to bust a union, its chairwoman's firm is making huge fees off unionized workers' retirement savings. As Starbucks wages an aggressive anti-union campaign resulting in the firing of 16 pro-union workers, the company's chairwoman has been running an investment firm raking in millions in fees from unionized workers' pension funds while delivering subpar returns to retirees. Starbucks chairwoman Melody Hobson has been publicly defending the coffee giant's union-busting activities. She recently told Starbucks shareholders that while, quote, "we absolutely understand and recognize the right of our partners to organize, the company will refuse to stay neutral in union elections because that, quote, limits our ability to speak to our partners in certain ways, and that goes directly against the DNA of the company." When she says certain ways, what she means is deceptive ways to squash organizing and silence workers. That's what she means, and they should be disallowed from doing that. At the same time, Hobson is leading Ariel Investments, which manages more than $640 million in assets for Chicago area pension funds, earning the firm more than $3 million annually in fees. The members and retirees of those pension funds are overwhelmingly represented by unions, including the same one, SEIU, that is seeking to organize Starbucks workers. In effect, Chicago area union members are financing, with fees and poor returns, Hobson's career, all while she helps lead a Fortune 500 company working to block a union drive and prevent a landmark victory for the larger labor movement. Quote, decades of underfunding of public pension funds has effectively held working people and retirees hostage to asset managers that actively work against the interest of working people while not delivering what they've promised. Samir Santi, a professor of labor and urban studies at the City University of New York, told The Lever. An evangelist for active management. Hobson is well known for her friendship with the Obamas, her marriage to Star Wars billionaire George Lucas, and her deep ties to Chicago's political machine. Less known is her success convincing pension overseers to funnel unionized workers' retirement savings to her investment management firm, all while she leads a publicly traded company that is hostile to the labor movement. Hobson's balancing act between finance and union capital and labor has been predicated on her sales pitch to pension officials about active management, which seeks to beat the market by actively picking stocks that proponents insist deliver better results than low-fee stock index funds. Hobson told an audience in 2019 that investors, quote, will understand that it is worthwhile to pay for an active return. If that was true, Hobson and pension officials might be able to insist that big returns for union workers' retirement funds justifies funneling money to a top official of Starbucks, even as the company now tries to block a union. But the investment results tell a different story. The Chicago Teachers Pension Fund, which serves 90,000 active, inactive, and retired unionized teachers and principals, has $79 million invested with Ariel as part of a foreign stock strategy. According to fund documents from late last year, over the past 5 years, the Ariel strategy returned 4.5%, compared with the MSCI index of foreign stocks returning 8.8%. The difference cost the pension funds around $16 million. The Illinois State University's retirement system, with 240,000 mostly union members and retirees, has plunged $129 million in the same strategy, while the Cook County pension, with 40,000 nearly entirely unionized members and retirees, has put in $121 million. They keep going here. I won't bore you guys with more details, but you get the idea. Unionized workers are paying fees to a woman who is actively fighting to bust Starbucks unions. This is the society that we have set up, and this is how it is supposed to operate. That's not a part of the system that's broken. That's the system functioning exactly as it was designed to function, to screw over working class people at the behest of the already super wealthy and the companies that profit off of said working people's labor. Great reporting from The Lever. Once again, you guys, they just do really fantastic reporting. Levernews.com. Make sure that you are following all of the stuff that they put out. One of the very few outlets that I really do trust in today's media environment. So fantastic work from The Lever there. And, again, like a series of unsurprising stories. I'm sure my audience is not surprised by any of those stories, but it's always worth keeping front and center. I think this labor movement is going to be a catalyst for, moving the needle, at least, as it pertains to the progressive fights and the progressive movement. So I want to talk a little bit here about Christian Smalls. We mentioned him on the I think on the interview with James. Might have been Birrion now. I'm just like conflating all of the interviews I've done this week. But anyhow, for those that didn't see, Christian went on Tucker Carlson and continued his push, his activism for unionizing Amazon across the country. And he caught a bunch of flack from Democratic partisans for this. And that's not surprising, but it is, worth pointing out. They essentially said no one should go on Tucker Carlson's show. And it's, you guys, like, can we get past this ridiculous fucking notion that going on someone's platform is endorsing that person? It's not. It is just not. Okay? There's always like some context. Each situation is unique, right? Like, so for example, if Joe Biden goes on some no-name person's podcast, yes, you could argue that is the president of the United States, like, propping up said podcast if that person doesn't have a lot of views. So there's context, there's nuance, of course, involved in each of these discussions. And I'm not advocating, by the way, for popular progressives to go out and sort of put a spotlight on bad faith actors or on discriminatory people or conservatives. I'm not advocating for that at all. You should make smart decisions about whose platform you contribute to and whose you do not, right? That's obvious. But it's also really obvious that Christian Smalls was reaching an audience by going on Tucker's show that he would not otherwise have reached. I mean, they have millions and millions of viewers. As outrageously terrible of a human being as Tucker Carlson is, why would you not take him up on his offer to provide you his platform? I do not understand this criticism of Christian Smalls. I don't understand it at all. And by the way, if you'd rather him go on MSNBC or CNN, why don't you press them to have him on? Is anyone out there under the illusion that Christian Smalls would refuse to go on one of those networks? I'm pretty sure he's been on those networks before. Okay. So their refusal, why isn't MSNBC, the supposed lefty network, why aren't they having him on left and right? Why aren't they pushing for these unions? Dude, why ain't that the case? Why does he have to resort to going on Tucker? Anyway, I just thought that the criticism of Christian was absolutely ridiculous, and I also wanted to show you guys his response to this. He tweeted this during all of the outcry from the Democratic partisans. He said, "You're focused on me, I'm focused on we." Fantastic shit, you guys. I really could not possibly be more impressed by this guy. I have been at every step thoroughly impressed by how he conducts himself, how he messages things, how he responds to efforts to stop him, right? Amazon has him fucking arrested bringing food to the warehouse. He's constantly met by increasingly large hurdles from Amazon, from police, from the media, etc., etc. And yet he continues to just fight and win. I am so thoroughly impressed by this guy, honestly. And that is a picture-perfect response to the criticism that he has received. You're focusing on me. I'm focusing on we. I'm out here fighting for Amazon workers. What are you doing by criticizing me for that? Whose side are you on? I fucking love it, you guys. I absolutely love it. And you know what else? I covered this last week. His willingness to call out progressive politicians who left him high and dry. I love that too. I hope like hell that those said politicians will take a more active role when this opportunity presents itself next time. And hopefully his criticism will move things in the right direction. He has not bought into the sort of self-censorship that most people who get a following or have an audience or a platform seem to buy into. Like, he doesn't do this access thing. He doesn't care what AOC thinks of him or what Mondaire Jones thinks of him. He's going to tell his truth. He doesn't care what some Democratic partisan thinks of him when he goes on Fox News to talk about Amazon organizing. He doesn't care. And I fucking love it. It's refreshing. So, huge shout out to Christian Smalls. He is at @shut_down Amazon. If you all are not following him, you're missing out. Go follow and support Christian Smalls. He is going to be one of the leaders of this labor movement as we continue to win. I don't know what else to say. Just wonderful stuff from Christian, and a fantastic response to the outrageous and incoherent criticisms of his decision to take his message to any platform that will have him. Want to talk a little bit about the Pramila Jayapal and the progressives' endorsement of Chantel Brown. I know we talk a lot on this show about, what value electoral politics has anymore. And I know that my audience is probably quite divided on Nina Turner. I want to say a few things. I mean, first of all, we absolutely should hold any politician or candidate to a very high standard. I'm not opposed to criticizing anybody in power. Okay, that's first of all. But I also do want to criticize those who seem to have figured out that there is a whole lot of clicks to be had and money to be made and fame to be garnered by doing nothing but criticize the AOCs of the world. And I think both positions are outrageous. I think the AOC sycophants who cry foul at any criticism of AOC are outrageous. And that's I think the same of people who do that of Nina Turner too. I also think the people who've made their entire political position here that they're anti any elected official and any candidate, I think you're kind of you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I think that's equally ridiculous and absurd. Okay, electoral politics is a tool. It is not going to be the catalyst for change. The things we've just been talking about are going to be the catalyst for change. The labor movement, right? Direct action, organizing, protesting, demonstrating, those kinds of things, strikes. If we can get any sort of general strike going, that would be a huge catalyst for change. Those are going to drive change. But that doesn't mean, you guys, that we just throw out a tool. I don't understand this sort of hyper reflexive resistance to any sort of electoral politics. I just don't quite understand it. Okay. So that's why I continue to talk about it and cover it, because it does have some meaning here. And I also think that this is worth covering in the sense that that Pramila is such an incredible disappointment at this point. Just an incredible disappointment. So I'm going to show you a tweet here. This is a retweet from Crystal Ball of The Lever. Lever tweets, breaking: an oil mogul is bankrolling a super PAC, launching last-minute ads to try to crush Nina Turner as she campaigns for a Green New Deal, and as her opponent declines to sponsor House Democrats' major climate legislation. That obviously is Chantel Brown, who is corporate funded, who ran one of the dirtiest campaigns against Nina that I have ever seen, who lied about Nina's positions, lied about her own positions, etc. And now the Congressional Progressive Caucus, which is chaired by Pramila Jayapal, has come out and endorsed Chantel Brown. Crystal retweets this and says the Congressional Progressive Caucus endorsed a candidate bankrolled by an oil mogul. Disgraceful. And that's exactly correct. It's exactly correct. If you can't tell a difference between Chantel Brown and Nina Turner, I think you need to open your eyes up. Again, I'm not saying Nina's perfect, you guys, and I think that when we need to criticize her, we should. I'm not like hypersensitive to that. I don't care. But if you can't tell a difference between those two, like, I don't know what to tell you. I'm not telling you to spend your money on Nina. I'm not telling you got to go out of your way to support her if you're just kind of done and disenfranchised with electoral politics. I get it. I really get it, you guys. But for the Congressional Progressive Caucus, who was sent to Congress to fight for progressive policies like what Nina Turner has in her platform, for them to turn on her and betray her, for them to endorse a corporate-friendly, corrupt hack like Chantel Brown, and such an obvious one, is egregious and, as Crystal said, disgraceful. Shame on Pramila Jayapal and the Congressional Progressive Caucus for this one. They have completely gone full mask off. They are not there to fight for progressive policies. And that is made all too obvious here. And I don't understand, by the way, guys, are they naive and stupid enough to think that this endorsement is going to buy them favor with the establishment? Are they really that naive? Do they really think, after fighting against Manchin and Sinema and Biden for all of this time, do they really honestly think that this is somehow going to buy them favor with Democratic leadership? Does Pramila Jayapal really think that she's going to be given a leadership position here? Do you all remember how that went with AOC when she basically capitulated to Pelosi and folded on Force the Vote because she thought she was going to get some committee positions? Do you all remember how that went? Not only did AOC not get any committee positions, they removed Rashida Tlaib and I think one other from their committee positions. So when you capitulate to the Democratic leadership, they punch you in the face again. And then these progressives keep saying, yes, thank you, I'll have another. It's outrageous. It is feckless at best, because the alternative to it being feckless is that it's intentional and coordinated and that they're opposition. I just cannot possibly emphasize enough. Shame on Pramila Jayapal and the Congressional Progressive Caucus here. This is absolutely outrageous and insane. And, again, you guys, I know my audience has mixed feelings about electoral politics. I don't want to come off as though I am saying that's going to be the catalyst for change and you should drop everything and go get engaged in electoral politics, because that's not my belief and that's not what I'm trying to say. But I do encourage people to support Nina Turner over Chantel Brown. When there is a clear enough distinction like that, I do think it's worth our time to engage in that tool. It doesn't mean every single race. It doesn't, there are just not a whole lot of excellent progressive candidates compared to the number of overall House and Senate seats that there are. But if you are in an area where there is a good candidate, like in my area, there's Jason Call. We interviewed Jason Call, a couple months ago, running against Rick Larson. He's worth supporting. Nina Turner against Chantel Brown, worth supporting, you guys. There are certain instances where I do think it is worth our time to engage and use the tool that we have. And I just want to encourage everybody, be skeptical. I get it. I'm as skeptical as you are. Sincerely, I really am. But don't let that turn to full-blown cynicism where we're giving up on our own movement and throwing tools that we have out the window out of pure spite and out of frustration. Don't allow yourself to go down that road, because guess who wants that? Those who are currently benefiting from the status quo would love nothing more than for us to throw all of our tools out the window, okay? So continue supporting the labor movement. Continue engaging in direct action. Continue engaging in protests and strikes. Continue demonstrating. All of it. Continue, engaging and trying to shift narratives in the direction that we need. But I also encourage you not to throw the baby out with the bathwater here. So anyway, I felt the need to comment on that story because it seemed pretty ridiculous, and I can't even follow at this point the strategy of Jayapal and the other congressional progressives. I can't even follow the strategy. I don't see where they win there. They're pissing off their own base more than they are gaining anything with the establishment. I mean, seriously, you think because you endorse Chantel Brown, Nancy Pelosi's suddenly going to work with you or give you some concessions? I mean, honest, how out to lunch can you possibly be? Outrageous. Anyhow. So I have one more story here that I wanted to cover, you guys. I wanted to show you this article, but it's Fox News, but it's to point out how outrageous their framing of this is. The reason I can't show it to you is because Fox demands that I get rid of my ad blocker to view their fucking website, and I'm not getting rid of my ad blocker for Fox News. So I'm just going to read you guys the headline here. I'm going to say this a couple times because I want to make sure everybody hears it. This is what I'm trying to talk about. Alexandra Hunt is running for the Senate in Pennsylvania. She is a progressive. This is the title that Fox News wrote about Alexandra Hunt. Quote, former stripper running for Congress says, and this is in quotations, climate emergency partially prompted decision to get an abortion. Okay, once again, you guys, former stripper running for Congress says climate emergency partially prompted decision to get an abortion. Where do you start with that? First of all, putting climate emergency in quotes is outrageous. The climate emergency is real, despite Fox's desire to pretend it is not, just like their desire, by the way, to pretend that COVID's not real or that it's over. But notice what they're trying to say here. Former stripper and abortion. Okay. And then they went on. The lead talked about how she had an OnlyFans. So you got three culture sort of, attacks based on sexuality. In an attempt to smear a candidate in ways that have literally nothing to do with her what her job would be as a U.S. senator. And I just thought that was a really prime example of how the media works. They deflect to nonsense that they know will piss people off in order to engage in smearing. But I also want to point out, and this gives me some hope in some ways. And I actually, when I saw this article, I retweeted it with this comment. Guys, when they resort to that kind of tactic, they're fucking terrified. Like they're worried Alexandra Hunt is actually going to win, and they're terrified of what she means for their donors and for their advertisers and for their corporate executives and shareholders, etc., and the candidates that they support who do their bidding. All of it. They're terrified. They're scared shitless, and they should be. So, I'm hoping that this will have some of that Streisand effect where it backfires and people come out in support of Alexandra. If you are not familiar with her campaign, I encourage you to look her up. Alexandra Hunt running for the Senate there in Pennsylvania. And anyway, just wanted to kind of end on a light story like that. The way the news frames these things, the way they decide what to cover and what not to cover, and who you are supposed to love or hate, is worth understanding on a sort of comprehensive level. Otherwise, it's impossible to digest articles and content, in any sort of reasonable way or way that's kind of attached to reality, objective way, or as close to objective as we can get, right? So that's Alexandra Hunt running in Pennsylvania, and Fox News demonstrating many of the things that are wrong with the media, as they often do. So with that, you guys, I'll go ahead and call it a stream. I know it was a little shorter today. I hope everybody who celebrates is having a fantastic Easter out there. Keep your eye out for more content this week. We're going to talk with Eric Kessner this week about his activities there in Washington, D.C. Huge shout out and thanks to both Jay Befont and Birrion for joining to do some fantastic interviews today. realprogressives.org for more of our fantastic content, including articles by writers like Birrion. And if you'd like to contribute, we are a 501c3 and 501c4, realprogressives.org/donate. If you'd like to help us out, we very much appreciate it. Anything helps. And I just, once again, you guys, I want to plug this basket and the raffle being done by M for All. Go to m4mforall.org/donate, if you would like to participate. For every $10 you spend there, you get a raffle for this basket. You can see some treats, and there's also some M for All swag that'll be coming in that basket. It's got $100 value with free shipping. So if you're interested in helping them pay for some of their activism and organizing, I encourage you all to hop on over there to their website, learn more about them, and contribute and have the chance to win a nice little goodie basket there. Thank you all for tuning in today, and I hope you all have a fantastic week. I will see you all next Sunday, 5 Eastern, 2 Pacific, as always.